Hello everyone. I hope this video finds everyone doing well, enjoying classes, and leaping into October with some good vibes and feeling good about life and the semester and all that kind of stuff. So before I jump into what we are doing in these next couple weeks and what we did the last few weeks, let me thank you for all of your patience with me. Like I mentioned at our last meeting, I started my second job last week, and having to do different shifts is kind of throwing me off. So this is my adjustment period, and likely the next time I need to post a video, I will do much better. I'll have a better schedule then, I'm hoping, more concrete. So let's jump right in. This is our weeks 7 through 8 check-in video. So weeks 5 through 6, we talked about our second round of best practices, and that was focused on looking at different tutoring theories. So for our new writing fellows, this meant we looked at theories of directive and non-directive tutoring, which we did touch on at our last meeting, if you recall. And then our returning fellows looked at other theories that were mentioned in different articles. So I will first talk about the non-directive and directive tutoring, and then we'll look at the one post we got from Selena about the other tutoring theories. So let me first congratulate everyone on a job well done with these articles. I think I did mention in the post that these are, or maybe my last video, these readings were more difficult. This is writing center theory that you're getting at right here, and it's very academic. It's very much journal based. These are things that if you went to a conference on composition, college composition, there would be whole panels just talking about tutoring and writing centers and things like that, and this is the kind of stuff that would be discussed. So great job on getting through it. I know there were a couple of you that were like, this was the worst thing I've ever read. I couldn't understand it. But trust me, reading your responses, you all got the gist of this. And the gist of it is that non-directive is this idea that the tutee has all the power, for the most part, in a tutoring session. So the tutor comes in and says, what did you want to work on in your paper, and lets the student guide everything, while still making sure that they discuss important things that are pretty obvious that would need work. And then a directive tutoring approach is very much where the tutor is a teacher and is imparting their knowledge to the student that they're working with. So I think this was Nicole's post, broke it down really nice, the idea of the storehouse, the Garrett Center, and then collaboration. So the storehouse is where the tutor knows everything and is imparting their knowledge, not sharing, but giving their knowledge to the student they're working with. Knowledge is an external thing that's meant to go from one person to another. And then the idea of the Garrett Center is the opposite, where tutors help tutees uncover their prior knowledge and find their own style. And yes, Nicole, I am stealing your words here. Knowledge becomes an internal thing, where it is the tutee that knows what needs to be done. They just need help to kind of uncover it a little bit, have some encouragement of, what do you think needs to be done here? Yes, that's right. Your organization looks like it might need some help. I'm glad you were able to notice that, so let's work on it. And then the idea of collaboration that plays more into the Garrett Center idea, but actually takes another step, is that neither party has the power. So the tutee doesn't have the power like they do in the Garrett Center model. The tutor doesn't have the power like they do in the storehouse model. Neither party has full power. Their tutor and tutee are on equal standing. They both have knowledge, same level of knowledge, but maybe about different things, and that would be something that gets respected throughout the tutoring session. So that's the sum up of the two theories, and then everyone got to the same point eventually, that the reason I had you read those three mandatory ones is because there really is no right or wrong answer as far as which one is best. It's more that knowing which situations call for a certain style to be used. Let's see. Someone talked about this. So I can't remember who had the Kumon math lesson example. I copy and paste this into a list, and so I have notes for the videos. But someone talked about Kumon math lessons. And with math, if you're going to teach someone math, you cannot be non-directive. You can't say, well, I don't know how you find the answer to that question. What do you think? You might be able to start there, but if a student looks at you with a blank face, you can't just sit there for 15 minutes and let them try to figure it out. You have to step in and tell them what to do. So the same thing might go for if you have a student that has great ideas and the way that they express them in organization and things like that is great, but their grammar needs help. Grammar, to a certain point, is one of those things you cannot sit back and say, I don't know what a comma is for, what do you think? And the four of you with me know this because I've been giving grammar lesson days, and on those days it's purely lecturing. I cannot stand up there and say, well, what do you think about semicolons, right? There's hard and fast rules for certain grammar things. So I have to be more directed in that case. Same if you're working with a student on an essay. If you're talking about grammar, you probably need to be more directive. You can move to a non-directive tutoring style once you've given them the rule. You know, here's one sentence. You have a comma issue. Let's look at this. And then you find another sentence that has the same problem. Then you can be non-directive and say, so we just talked about this. How do you fix this one? Like math, right? You learn how to do addition or how to do the FOIL method on one problem. You're very directive helping a student do that. And then they get another problem that's the same thing. You say, well, you just learned this. Now apply it to this new situation. So directive and non-directive, one is not necessarily better than the other. As you all came to the conclusion, it's dependent on the situation. And one of my favorite examples of that many of you picked up on is this emulative learning idea. And the article that mentioned that specifically talks about the idea of music. And in music, once you get to a certain level, they have this thing called a master class. And I remember watching a PBS special on this where they had several young singers, musicians that were invited to New York to do master classes with, you know, famous singers and musicians. And so, you know, the experienced master person, the famous person essentially, would get up and do a performance, and then they'd have someone who was chosen to work with them in front of everybody else too, oddly enough. And they'd get up, and if it was a singer, you know, they'd sing their song, they'd get through it, and then the famous person, the master singer, would make comments. And this was years ago that I watched this, but I remember very specifically one of the masters was Sutton Foster, who is a very famous Broadway actress. And she sang a song, and then she worked with a guy. And the song that he was singing involved a lot of, like, breathless anticipation. It was a song about love and that falling in love where it hits you all of a sudden and you are kind of just left breathless. So he sang his song, and she thought he didn't really have that sense of breathlessness, that excitement. So she actually made him run around the auditorium that they were doing this in, and then had him go back to the stage and immediately start singing. And she said, you see that? That's how I want you to sing this song. You're breathless because you just ran around a bunch. Now you don't have to do that every time, but have that same idea. So music is very much a directive thing, to the point that you can tell someone how to do something, but with music you can't do it for them, right? And writing is very much the same thing. If I don't know if any of your other instructors have done this, or even in your own experience with English, but they may have given like sample essays. I want you to write an argument essay. So let's look at other people's argument essays. But by showing what someone else has done, and you look at how they broke things down, right? If it's an argument essay, what's a debatable thesis look like? Well, let's look at their argument. How do we know? And then how did they integrate evidence into their paper? So you look at something and then you emulate that. You do it on your own with your own material, right? That's how I structure my own classes too. We spend, 2 weeks or so looking at published pieces that would fall into the category of like the last few weeks' definition essays. And then the students get some idea from that of what their definition essay should look like. They pick their own topics, and then they try to do the same kind of thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But this idea of emulative learning, it's almost a mixture of directive. Let's look at what they did here. We're going to do the same thing. And then non-directive of once they actually start doing their own writing, it becomes, this is your paper. How do you want to approach this? And then you're going to have the students who either don't respond to that and just look to you to tell them how to do everything, and the ones who don't need the guidance, the ones who don't feel they need the guidance, but then get to a point where you feel like your essay is defining a word, yes, but it's not really doing much else. So how do I get them to figure this out? And I believe it was Adrian. This came up quite a bit actually with people's things. How do I help someone without telling them what to do? And it's one of those things, Nicole responded to this one, it's something you learn over time, and it's really, really hard at first, right? So if any of you have faced this too, if you're working in an essay workshop or something, or even in a one-on-one session, open-ended questions are always best. Avoid at all possible yes or no questions. And maybe I'll post up one of my essay workshop worksheets, and show as a demonstration of what open-ended questions look like. You never say when you're talking about an introduction, was their introduction good, right? You ask them to point out what was the hook in the introduction. So that's a little more of a closed question, but it still makes them have to go and look it up. And then you can ask a question like, rate the effectiveness of this hook. Did it draw you in, right? It's still a yes or no question, but asking them to rate the effectiveness makes it a little better. Better yet, you ask them, how might you have done this differently, right? If it's something about a thesis, not did the paper have a thesis, but what was the thesis? And then ask them to outline the rest of the paper and say, does this thesis match with what you have here, right? Asking them to almost do something with the paper before they get to a yes or no question. Trying to think of some other examples here. So in a workshop especially, I find that lots of times if students are reading papers out loud or however a professor might have them done, there'll be a good 5 minutes before anyone has a comment to make. That's not, it was good, I liked it. And if you're sitting in on a group that's doing a workshop, and that's the kind of response you get, then sit there for a bit. Let them feel the tension. Let them stew in their ideas, because more likely than not, they're going to have more to say. If you jump in too early, then they're going to figure you'll always be able to cover what they are too afraid to say. And you'll find that as they sit there, they start to think back on what they heard and going, there was this one part that confused me. I didn't quite get it. And that way they take the wheel a little bit, take control over what the comments are and what their focus of the workshop might be. And then you can always add follow-up questions. So some of my workshop groups lately, they would get super close to hitting on something that I noticed as I sat in on a paper being read. And then you just need to lead them to the right vocabulary. So I'm remembering one from earlier this semester where it was a personal narrative essay, and the story didn't actually start until about page 3 of 6, I think it was. And I wanted the students to make a comment on it, and they didn't at first. They were doing the whole "it's good, I liked it" kind of thing. And then as they sat and thought more about it, they started to realize that there was a bit of rambling going on at the beginning. So I asked the question of, where did the story actually start for you? Where do you think the action took place? So they answered that question, and then it led them to thinking more of, was that stuff at the beginning even really needed? I didn't even have to ask the question. They started to go, maybe they should just start from page 3 and take out all that extra stuff. And you'll find as they start to feel more confident in the comments they're making, then they'll skip over that whole awkward period of "it was good, I liked it," and go straight to the what can they work on, right? And you always want to stress, if you're doing a workshop thing, there's always going to be something good about someone's paper, and then you want to provide them with constructive criticism. So they can start with the good, but always make sure that they get around to actually thinking about how a paper can be improved. I was reading back some of the old posts, and people were talking about perfection, and really there's no such thing as a perfect paper. So you can reiterate that to students you work with. It's not that your paper is horrible, but there's always room for improvement, even if you write a great paper, right? Even if a paper gets an A from an instructor, that doesn't mean that if they had something that wasn't quite right, that, how am I trying to say this? Even if a paper gets an A, that doesn't mean that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm sure there was at least one comment made on how it can be improved next time around. All right, what else did I want to say here? I liked this idea of collaboration, and I think it was Des who said she was absolutely tired of reading the word collaboration by the time she was done with these assignments. But it really is an important idea, and I found myself more than ever this semester going to group discussions, small group discussions, as a way for the students to work out meaning in something. So in tutoring, this comes into play with the idea, going back to neither party is in control. The tutor and the tutee both have knowledge. It's not going to be the same knowledge, but you both have knowledge, and there's an exchange that should occur in any session. And so it was mentioned about the learning a new Filipino word from a first grade student. This is Nicole's post again. And then you can think about just gaining a new perspective on something from a student's point of view. Like there was an essay that I was discussing with students the other day. Someone in my class, when we did a blind exchange, wrote on teen moms. And their point of view on teen moms was not that it's a bad thing, but that though we label teen moms as, not always being ready for the responsibilities, there's an issue that comes into play with maturity level. Just because you're young doesn't mean you're not mature. And then there was a really interesting idea that having a child at a younger age gives you more time to spend with them, rather than waiting until you're in your 30s, mid to late 30s, and then when your kid grows up, if you think about that, you'll be 50 by the time they are starting college or halfway through college. And so that was a sentence I mentioned, and I actually think one of the students had mentioned it before me, because I thought it was really interesting. So you get really different perspectives when you're working with writers, especially any writers, whether they're students you're working with or someone in your English classes or other classes. This collaboration idea is really interesting and comes into play, this exchanging of knowledge. All right, so I think that about covers the directive and non-directive. So let me touch a little bit on Selena's post about the tutor as creative teacher. And this one talked about the idea of tutors having a unique perspective on a class. I mean, it's meant for TAs, teaching assistants, but you guys are kind of treading that line, your tutors and your TAs, depending on how you're being utilized in the classrooms you're in. So you have this really weird spot you're in where you're part of the class, but you're not really part of the class. So Nicole and Derek today, they'll tell you about this at our next meeting maybe, but we were having an essay talking about dating, and the two of them, or the two of you, I don't know how to phrase this because you're watching it too, but Derek and Nicole both started to almost do the assignment that I was giving to the students. And so it's not required, right, that you guys do this, but to be part of a class and not feel the pressure of having to do the assignments for any purpose other than because you want to. And then what often happens, I will talk to the two of you after class and get your insight. Did this class go well? Should I do something like this again? Do you have suggestions? And so it's a really useful tool for me, and I think it's really useful for Derek and Nicole. I hope you guys tell me it is, to be able to do some meta thinking about teaching and how you go about it. And these are things you could try out with the students as you are working with them in sessions, right? Steal some of the things we do in class and figure out how you can utilize them during a session. So the theory that came out of this one that Selena mentions was this idea of a watering hole. And I think an updated idea would be the water cooler metaphor, right? The place where everyone in an office would gather to talk stories, share ideas. They talk about a watering hole. It makes me think of like the savannah in Africa where all the animals come and, the lions hunt the antelope kind of thing. So I like the water cooler idea a little bit better, where everyone comes together to share ideas. And a quote from the article, tutors and teachers working together with one another, students, as well as with senior faculty, students, inevitably leads to discussion of writing theories, classroom projects, and the merits and failings of assignments. So this is an opportunity you guys can have. I don't know how open Amy and Tiare are to it, but offer your insight sometimes. They'll tell you too. The English lecturers, there are like 7 of us, we meet periodically, usually once a month, just like you guys are doing with our meetings, and we talk about things like grading, how to grade better, basically how to prevent our stress levels from rising every time we have to grade something. We talk about how we frame assignments, how we build a project or do group work or something like that. So it's something that we carry over into professional teaching, not just a tutor and teacher relationship, but amongst coworkers. So you can even think about our meetings that we're having every month as this kind of watering hole / water cooler moment where we can all come together, and you guys, once hopefully everyone starts getting more experience with the tutoring itself, you can start sharing what's working, what's not working. What kind of tips would you want to try out next time around, right? So this is a really nice article, I think, and a little bit out there because it was more of a focus on TAs rather than tutors, but there's still a relationship there with the writing center. And so writing center is essentially what our No-AL is, except it's a all subject center, and the writing part is just a small slice of that. Okay, so great job on the responses the last 2 weeks, and I talked way too long about that as usual. The coming 2 weeks, what we're doing is taking a look at, now not necessarily, well, not at all, not the tutor's perspective now, but looking at the types of students you'll deal with. So we're going to focus on 4 of them. So we have, let me look here. We have writers who have writing anxieties, writers who have learning disabilities, writers who have physical disabilities, and writers who are writers who are second language learners or adult learners. Okay, so 5 types: writing anxieties, learning disabilities, physical disabilities, second language learners, and adult learners. And I may have to go back and edit to make sure I have the right number when I'm talking about it. So what I'm asking you to do, last couple weeks I gave you articles to choose from. Now we're stepping up our game, and you guys are going to be finding the articles this week. So I'm asking you to find 2 resources, and this really applies to new and returning fellows, so I'm not going to have to talk too much about the differences here. You're finding 2 resources, online or in print, I don't really care, in one of these 5 student types. Okay, again, repeating, even though I know you probably hate it. Writing anxiety students, learning disabled students, physically disabled students, second language writers, adult learners. Okay, any of those. So 2 resources, online or print, and then in a 2 to 3 page response, because you've got more to respond to this time. And this is 1 response for both sources, not 2 to 3 pages for each one. Give me a brief summary of each source's main points. Then consider the suggestions the author provides, or the authors provide for working with this particular type of students. Okay. How can you apply these suggestions to your own tutoring? You may or may not have one of these types of students in your classes. I would suggest, if you do have someone that you might guess or you know that is in this category, one of these categories, that you choose that one to research, because it would be most useful for you. So how can you apply these suggestions to your tutoring? And then please provide a citation for the 2 sources you choose. And then I give you a little tip there. A simple Google search on some of these isn't going to yield much. So you're going to want to stick to Google Scholar likely, and then the other thing you can use that's going to be the best database for this is EBSCO's ERIC research database, is the education one. So go straight there rather than doing the one search, and do searches for tutoring, or you can even keep it as general as teaching students in one of those 5 categories. Okay, if you're having trouble, I know this video is going up, a couple days late, but if you're having trouble finding anything, that's where you guys remember your resources and go and talk to a reference librarian. They're going to be able to help you out here better than I could, likely. Okay. So the only difference between new and returning fellows this time is the returning guys, so Jace and Selena. If you recall, you did this very assignment in the spring. So I went back and looked at La Lima and tried to see which topics you had written on. So this time around, you're doing the same assignment, but looking up a different type of student. So Selena, last time you looked at students with learning disabilities. Okay, so any of the other 4 are available to you. Jace, you did 2 last time around, so you cannot research either students with learning disabilities or second language learners. So both of those categories are off limits. Choose one of the other 3. Okay? And then I remind you guys specifically, last time we used this topic, we were using the old version of the text. You guys are going to be reading the new chapter that I will post as a PDF on the schedule page. So that opens up a category of physical disabilities where you don't have that in the old version of the text. So that's the other thing. With the assignment this week, you're going to be reading the chapter, The Writers You Tutor. They have this chapter in the old textbook, the one that most of you have bought. I think all of you have bought. But I'm going to post the new one because there are some slight changes. I like how they refer to these types of students better in the new version than the old. So heed the warning on the schedule. Read the PDF, not the version in your textbook. Okay? So that is our assignment for this week. A reminder, our next Writing Fellow meeting is coming up on the 28th. So that will be 3 weeks from this Friday. So essentially it's 3 weeks and 2 days, or 2 days from now. 3 weeks and 2 days. Okay, so keep that on your calendar. I will be sure to send out reminders as we get closer. And I will likely remind you in my video that will be not this week, because this is this week's one, but I think it should be the video on the week of the 17th. I think that's the date there. Yes. Week of the 17th will be your next video, so I'll remind you of our meeting again that week. Alright, so have a good next couple weeks. Enjoy this assignment, learn some more stuff, and I'll see you guys around.